We have a quorum. Let's get started. Welcome to the 9th meeting of the Bills Committee. We first invite the administration in. With us today, we have Mr. Roy Tang, Permanent Secretary for Constitutional and Mainland Affairs, Ms. Cordelia Lam, Principal Assistant Secretary, Ms. Joycelyn Ng, Assistant Secretary, Mr. Lawrence Pang, Deputy Law Draftsman acting from the DOJ, and Mr. Jonathan Look, Senior Government Counsel. Welcome. Before the end of the last meeting, 8 members indicated that they would raise questions on Clause 4. 10 minutes before the end of the last meeting, I indicated that members who wish to speak must press a button, and I would draw the line. So now I would invite members yet to speak on Clause 4 to press a button, and after that I would draw the line. I will also read out the names of members who were yet to speak at the last meeting but who indicated to speak. Dr. K.K. Kwok, I have a point of order. I'd like to know your criteria for drawing the line. 9 members are waiting to speak at the moment, and very often we would ask follow-up questions after the government offers a response. So can you tell us what your criteria are, or is it arbitrary? We spent the entirety of the last meeting discussing Clause 4, and I noted comments from members. And near the end of the meeting, I found that many members constantly asked the same questions on the definition of standing solemnly, etc. The government repeated the same answers. So some members might not be satisfied, but nonetheless, this must be accepted. So it's up to members whether or not they like the answers or support the bill. So that is my decision. So for redundant questions on the same clause, I would remind members ahead of time that I will draw the line. And at the last meeting, about 10 minutes towards the end, I reminded members that I would draw the line. And that is why today I asked members who wish to speak to press a button. So this would be my standard. So you are going to draw the line today. Members who wish to speak can still press a button together with the 8 members who pressed a button at the last meeting. I would read out their names. Please press the button now if you wish to speak. To the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. So for members who have pressed the button, at the last meeting, 8 members pressed the button and they were yet to speak. And in that order, they are Mr. Ao Lock Hin, Mr. Roy Kwong, Ms. Eddie Chu, Dr. Fernando Chang, Mr. Ted Hui, Mr. Ray Chan, Mr. Jeremy Tam, and Ms. Claudia Mo. We have a total of 11 members. So the order of speaking would be Mr. Ao Lock Hin, Mr. Roy Kwong, Mr. Dr. Fernando Chang, Mr. He Chi-fung, Mr. Jeremy Tam, Dr. K.K. Kwok, and Ms. Claudia Mo. Let's get started. Mr. Ao Lock Hin. Is he present? No. Mr. Roy Kwong is absent either. Mr. Gary Fan. He will speak for the second time. You have 3 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. I want to follow up on the question raised by Dr. Fernando Chang last time. for persons with disabilities. So when the anthem is played or sung, some PWDs might not be able to sing or play the anthem or stand solemnly, but nonetheless, if they participate in such occasions, well, on one hand, with the National Anthem Bill, the government hopes to foster the spirit of patriotism and to respect the anthem, etc. But for people who are unable to participate due to physical limitations, on one hand, you talked about preserving the dignity of the national anthem, but on the other, you are forcing people to take part in acts that they are not physically capable of. The Secretary offered a reply last time. Clause 4 is a guidance provision, and they provide guidelines for people who would attend to occasions where the anthem is played or sung. So for PWDs or the deaf and dumb, they might not be able to fulfill the conditions under clause 4 brackets 2 brackets A, but they would not be barred from attending such occasions. But due to their physical conditions, they might not be able to stand solemnly. But in fact, elderly people or people who happen to be sick at that time might not be able to do so either. But this is merely a guidance provision, and there would not be any liability. So if a person is deaf, he or she could not hear the anthem. They can stand, but they would not rise because they cannot hear the anthem. So does it mean that this person is disrespecting the anthem? So that there will be confusion or even groundless accusations. So you would not be able to achieve your goal of promoting respect towards the national anthem through legislation. Well, Permanent Secretary, can you repeat the same answer? For occasions at which the anthem is played and sung, these are very specific occasions, and I trust that most people would understand that the anthem is being played on such occasions. Mr. Wu Shiwai, 3 minutes. Thank you. Under clause 4 brackets 2 A and B, there is a connecting word and. Does it mean that both clause 4 brackets 2 brackets A and brackets B must be fulfilled together? Is this the guideline? Does it mean that both conditions A and B must be fulfilled? In the context of the bill, criteria A and B go hand in hand, and this is in line with the spirit of the drafting. So with the and condition, that means A and B must be fulfilled. So if only A or B is being fulfilled, would this be seen as adhering to the guidance provision? Mr. Wu Shiwai's interpretation is correct, but I must stress that this is not a standalone piece of legislation. It is based on the national anthem law. So in other words, both conditions must be fulfilled at the relevant conditions. And that is to stand solemnly and deport themselves with dignity, and B, to not behave in a way disrespectful to the national anthem.
任何嘅人士咧，佢只能夠係做到 A or B.
If a person can only fulfill either condition A or B, what would be the interpretation? Our view is that conditions A and B can be understood and fulfilled easily. So if a person only fulfills A or B for some reason, then they are seen as violating the guideline despite a lack of liability. Well, this is merely a guidance provision and no offense would be committed, so to speak. Ms. Eddie Chu, speaking for the third time, you have 2 minutes. Thank you. I asked a question earlier. When we apply the national flag law in Hong Kong, the treatment seemed to be different from the current approach. The government said that the circumstances are different and they find the current approach appropriate. And they have incorporated the elements of standing solemnly and acting in a respectful way in this bill. My view is that the government cannot simply say that the circumstances are different when they try to explain why a set of standards was adopted 20 years ago on the national flags legislation, but another approach now. In the Fugitive Offenders Ordinance 20 years ago, the firewall built in 20 years ago is now seen as a loophole by the government. So we had to revisit the legislative intent of the firewall approach 20 years ago for the FOO. And likewise, when the national flags and national flag and national emblem laws were enacted, why wasn't Article 13 of the national flag law adopted in the national anthem bill? So hopefully the government can offer a response. In the papers we submitted in March 995 18 to 19, paragraph 3 explained the scenario, and we sought to look up all these documents, and we did not see any discussion. We even checked the records of the Provisional Legislative Council, and at that time, the Bills Committee did not leave any written records. Mr. Roy Kwong, 3 minutes. Chairman, by the time we reached the clause-by-clause examination, well, I now have a question. The controversy in previous meetings was whether or not we had to include such provisions in the bill. If we feel that such provisions are redundant, why do we have to include these provisions in the bill? So there's already redundancy in the bill. Which provision were you referring to? We talked about standing solemnly at the last meeting, and the controversy is that, well, the Bills Committee would examine the provisions, but you told us that there is no liability or punishment. So our question last time was why, in that case, why do we need such provisions? So my question is, if you take away these provisions, would it affect the enforcement of the legislation? And you said if there are well, you said the liabilities or punishments are stipulated in other provisions. So before the clause-by-clause examination, well, this is a policy issue. Multiple questions have been asked at that stage. Yes, I hope they can offer a response. So on clause 4, can it be removed as Mr. Roy Kwong suggested?
In adapting from Annex 3 of the national law on national emblem, we have to give consideration to the fact that whenever it is feasible, we have to adapt the legislative intent of the national law on national emblem as much as possible. And so there is no question of its being repetitive. I would like to supplement. Mr. Fernando Zhang, third time, because the administration has been saying that Clause 4 is a guidance provision and there are no provisions for offense under it. Does it mean that if it is a guidance provision, then there is no need for it to be enforced? Or to put it more bluntly, if someone fails to meet the requirement under Clause 4, then that someone will not be construed as having broken the law. I think Mr. Zhang's understanding is completely correct. Clause 4(1) concerning occasions. So can you clarify that whether these are definitely public occasions, or is there any possibility that they can also be private occasions? I think this question has been asked last time. We should not look at the word occasion in an isolated manner. If you look at Part 4(1), we're talking about occasions where the national emblem is being played and sung. And for that, you have to go back to Clause 2(3), where a definition for the singing and the playing of national anthem is being defined. And so there is a possibility that non-public occasions are being included here, because we're talking about all occasions where the national anthem is being played and sung. So for 3(2), using musical instruments to play national anthem, or the singing of national anthem, or the recording of national anthem, and using scores to play national anthem. Then whenever that happens, then that is an occasion where national anthem is being played and sung. That is correct, because we're talking about all occasions where the national anthem is being played and sung. I think this would give people the impression that this is really a very, very wide catchment. So if someone intends to play and sing national anthem, albeit that he may be deviating from the official score a little bit, then on that particular occasion, everybody present must observe the required etiquette. I think this is a very, very extensive coverage. I think this is unnecessarily wide. We have already had 8 members asking questions on etiquette. I think Mr. Wu has already expressed similar opinions. So are you saying that Mr. Zhang shouldn't be asking this question here? We are not talking about the same occasion. We're talking about occasions where national emblem needs to be played. Because the word need here, it makes all the difference. Mr. Chen? I'd like to follow up on what the Secretary has said last week. Maybe the Permanent Secretary can help him here. Now, if all occasions where national emblem is being played, then Clause 4 will apply. Then, of course, the required etiquette has to be observed on such occasion. And last time, the Secretary has given us this answer. Let me give you a hypothetical situation. Now, at sports events or at a soccer match, there may be an official ceremony where national anthem may or may not be played or sung. But say there is a group of very patriotic fans, say several hundred of them. This group, out of their own volition, sings the national anthem, and some other people sing along. Now, in accordance with the definition given by the Secretary last week, then Clause 4 will apply in such an event. So we are talking about a group of fans singing national anthem out of their own volition. So that would become an occasion where national anthem is being sung. On such an occasion, what about the other participants or the attendees? Do they have to follow the group of patriotic fans that are singing the national anthem and sing along? Now, if Mr. Chen is correct in quoting the Secretary last week, I think what is being meant is that the other spectators out of the group of several hundred fans actually have not participated in that occasion, because the occasion is only confined to the several hundred fans. So if a group of fans are singing national anthem, then people out of that group will not be counted as being included in that particular occasion. Now, once again, this is a guidance provision, but Mr. Chan's understanding is the same as mine. Now, if you have not participated in that occasion, then what people on that occasion are doing will not include you. Now, if my question has already been asked, I apologize. I'd like to ask about 4.2. To not behave in a way disrespectful to the national anthem. I don't want to focus on the word disrespectful. I just want to say that this is being presented in a double negative construction. To not behave in a way disrespectful to the national anthem. Why did you not use an affirmative construction? Why did you not go for the wording such as to behave in a way respectful to the national anthem? Why do you have to go for a double negative construction? Can you enlighten us? I'm going to ask Mr. Pang to repeat what he said last time. Mr. Pang, Commissioner? Because for Clause 4, we have to fully reflect the legislative intent and spirit of Clause 7 of National Law. And National Law Clause 7 uses the double negative construction, and that's why it is being adapted here. If we were to simply use an affirmative construction, then that would be seen as a repetition of A. I think how the mainland law is being worded is really not a good justification for using the same wording in our Hong Kong law. Because for A, you did not use the double negative construction. You did not say that people should not stand in an unsolemn way and not deport themselves with dignity and so on and so forth. Mr. Kwok, just now the Permanent Sec has been saying that this is a guidance provision. However, if you look at that when the national law consultative document was being discussed in People's Republic of China's mainland, there were very, very specific requirements being laid down under the national law, down to very minute details, saying that the person singing the national anthem must not stop midway, must look very spirited, and so on and so forth. And so if someone is actually ill or someone is actually coming down with asthma, then there is no way for such a person to really enunciate the lyrics of the national anthem very clearly, which is specified under the national law. Now here you say that the etiquette provision really is only for guidance. And so even if someone fails to meet the requirement of etiquette, he or she will not have committed an offense. So I just want to clarify this. So the mainland law says that if someone is singing the national anthem, then he or she must not stop midway and must be very spirited and must enunciate very, very clearly. So does it mean that that will not be treated the same in Hong Kong? I just want to say that all substance under Clause 4 is already contained fully and entirely in the blue bill in front of you. And so if someone fails to meet the etiquette, he or she will not have committed an offense. Now, if someone shows disrespect, say he has not buttoned up his shirt or he is not standing upright, can you confirm that he will not be prosecuted on the basis of that? That is correct. We have already said that many times. Madam Claudia Mo. Right. We are done with Clause 4 and now Clause 5. Clause 5. Thank you. Clause 5 is on occasions on which national anthem must be played and sung. It corresponds to Clause 4 of national law. Clause 5.1, it sets out in Schedule 3 the national anthem must be played and sung at each occasion. And 5.2, the Chief Executive Council may, by notice published in the Gazette, amend Schedule 3. And Clause 5.3, in this section, a reference to the national anthem being played and sung is a reference to the national anthem being played on musical instruments in accordance with the standard score or an official recording of the national anthem being played for the singing of the national anthem. 5.4, in this section, official recording in relation to the national anthem means the recording of the national anthem provided for the purposes of this section on the website of the government, and it also mentions Schedule 3 under Clause 5, and it lists out all occasions where national anthem must be played, and so this is to correspond to Clause 4 of national law on national anthem. And we have, after adaptation, listed out occasions such as flag occasions, and National Day, and also Victory Day, and memorial events, Nanjing massacre, memorial services, and also major sports events, opening ceremony, and so on and so forth. And these are some of the occasions that have been listed in Schedule 3. Because Schedule 3 is related to Clause 5, and that's why when we scrutinize Clause 5, we have to also scrutinize Schedule 3. And if you want to speak, please press button. Mr. Alvin Young, 4 minutes, first time. 5.1. On each occasion set out in Schedule 3, the national anthem must be played and sung. And Schedule 3 occasions also mentioned in Clause 8, which include major sports events hosted by SAR government. I'd like to know whether there is a category called non-major sporting events. So how do you define major sporting events and non-major sporting events? Number one. Secondly, for international events not hosted by SAR government, if there is an ceremony to play and sing national anthem, then does Clause 5 still apply or Schedule 3 still apply? The answer is correct. If we are talking about non-government hosted sporting events, which happen even as we speak, and if they decide to play national anthem, then they will be caught by Clause 4, occasion where national anthem is being played. Okay, I want to follow up on this. Now, after this law comes into effect, these organizing bodies, do they have to apply to the government for the playing of national anthem? Absolutely not. They just follow their own customs. And now this particular construction in the law is to model itself after the national law. And major sporting events that we can think of are mostly hosted by the LCSD. And in future, if there are major sporting events, they will be included in Schedule 3. But we do not have any specific events that we talk about. We're talking about major sporting events. So is the Permanent Secretary saying that at this point in time, only territory-wide sporting events will be included under the category of major sporting events, and other sporting events such as the Chinese New Year soccer competition hosted by the Hong Kong Football Association, that will not be counted as major sporting events? Indeed. Now, if that is the case, is there a possibility that the definition for major sporting events will be widened to include other events? And if so, will the government make an announcement? Under Clause 5.2, the Chief Executive in Council may, by notice published in the Gazette, amend Schedule 3. And Schedule 3 has to be presented before LegCo for scrutiny. I'd like to know under what procedures will you be amending Schedule 3, expanding it or shrinking it? Now, if we're talking about major sporting events, then of course we have to give regard to the number of attendees and also the importance of the events, significance of the events, and sort of the scale of the events. I hope that the Permanent Sec can further elaborate, because my questions actually are not pertaining only to sporting events but also to all occasions under Schedule 3. Under what criteria will the Chief Executive in Council may expand or shrink Schedule 3 and the sporting events thereat, or the events thereat? According to our present observations, Schedule 3 already catch major events hosted by SAR government, not only sporting events. Now, if in future events of similar significance and scale emerge, then of course there is a possibility that they will be included in Schedule 3. But what criteria will you use in including or not including any particular events? Now, most of the events in Schedule 3 are government hosted, and number of attendees is likely to be very high, and they have a very high symbolic value and also of a great importance. And all of these will be factors of consideration for future events that may or may not be included in Schedule 3. When we talk about 5.2, we're talking about occasions, and earlier on you answer a question from Mr. Zhang, and that's about a different thing. Now we are really on occasions. And of the 9 items under Schedule 3, 8 of them are very, very specifically defined. For instance, reception, Victory Day, Nanjing Massacre, Memorial Day. All of them are very specific, except major sporting events, which are vague. So how do we define major sporting events? And so my concern is similar to Mr. Yang. If all the other 8 events are very specifically defined under Schedule 3, why is it that when you come to sporting events, you cannot specify an exhaustive list? So can you list out in an exhaustive manner sporting events, for instance, a national Hong Kong Sports Day or soccer matches and so on and so forth, even though the national games of Hong Kong has not had a very long history, only 10 years, but still I just want to understand what difficulties you have technically in listing out exhaustively the sporting events that are to be caught by Schedule 3. As far as we can see, National Games of Hong Kong definitely is one. But if you look at national law on national anthem, they also use the wording major sporting events, it is impossible to have an exhaustive list because you never know what kind of sporting events Hong Kong will be participating in future. But I'm talking about now. I'm talking about the present. I'm not talking about 2 years or 3 years down the road. I'm talking about now. So why can't you specify it in an exhaustive list manner the events that will be caught in Schedule 3?
Do East Asian Games count? For East Asian Games, there is a non-governmental organization because they have the SF and OC handling the East Asian Games. Chairman, my other question is in relation to clause 5 bracket 3 that needs to be played in accordance with the standard score. But then it doesn't say who would be responsible for playing. So I want to ask if who will be responsible for playing the national anthem? Who will be making this decision? For events held by the government, of course, the civil servants would be responsible for when the national anthem would be played and how it would be played, but it would still be using the official and standard score. So what rank are we talking about here? I think for each specific event, it would be the government to decide which department would be responsible for the playing of the national anthem. Dr. K.K. Kwok, 4 minutes, please. Thank you, Chairman. There are a few occasions for the oath-taking ceremony, which is easy to understand. For example, the taking oath of the chief executive or taking the oath of principal officials. However, there are still some issues. For example, for the judicial oath, we all know that we have an independent judicial system. The Court of Final Appeal is independent in handling with legal matters, and that should not be linked up with patriotism. We differ from the mainland. In Hong Kong, we have the 3 different independent arms. However, on the mainland, everyone has to listen to the party. So are you saying that judges when taking oath will be liable to working dependently on each other and just work under the chief executive? And is this the start of the showing of patriotic spirit? Or what is the reasons for playing the national anthem when the judicial oath is being made? Well, under the basic law, there is specific requirement that the chief executive, principal officials, legislative councillors, and judges, when taking oath, will need to be loyal to the HKSAR region. So that is actually the requirement of the basic law. Secondly, in Annex 5 of the oath taking legislation, there's also a clause for how to take oath under the basic law. So this is already current legislation. Well, I know about this because this has been ongoing since 1997. But now you are actually exceeding the basic requirements, because not only do you have to take oath to be loyal and patriotic, you now also have to sing the national anthem. What if the judge stutters or cough, or maybe a foreign judge will also need to learn to sing the national anthem, but he may not be very correct in his pronunciation. And you can say the judge that he is not being respectful to the national anthem. You know how the mainland requires people to stand up straight and to deport themselves properly. And now it seems that you are trying to add more pressure in starting the cooperation between the three arms. Well, there is no any ulterior motive behind this. Well, how about foreign judges? What happens during the oath-taking ceremony? How can they? Well, please ask in the second round. Thank you. Mr. Lam Chuk Ting, first round. Chairman, point 8 under schedule 3 of a major sporting event held by the government would also be an occasion on which the national anthem must be played and sung. I would like to follow up on this point. Why is it only limited to major sporting events held by the government? We know that each year during the handover or during National Day, everyone celebrates. In the Jockey Club, you have the Handover Cup and the National Day Cup. And there would be hundreds of thousands of visitors there. Well, in order to show patriotism, should you be more extensive and require the national anthem to be played and sung before a racing event? And that everyone should stand up straight and deport themselves in dignity before the horses start running. Well, wouldn't that be appropriate? Racing events horse racing events are also major events. Why don't you have the same requirement for that? Permanent Secretary. Well, I can say that this is not included under major sporting event held by the government because the Hong Kong Jockey Club does not belong to the government. Organizations are welcome to play and sing the national anthem, but then they would be covered under bracket under 4, subclause 4, because they can also celebrate the anniversary. Well, I understand, but then why don't you make this a requirement? Because Hong Kong Jockey Club is such a mega club. They should also be held responsible for showing patriotism. I think you should raise awareness. Otherwise, horse racing lovers would not understand what they need to do, and you would find it difficult to execute. And having hundreds of thousands of people standing up straight and deporting themselves in dignity should be also a sort of a spirit to show patriotism, because this is also a major event. Well, Charles Mock asked whether we need to consult the horse racers. So are you saying that you suggest making it a requirement? So you're suggesting that they also include this in the legislation? Or Chairman, well, we would consider all when we are drafting the bill. The scenario expressed by Mr. Lam. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people or 3 to 4 people. They just need to be careful of how they behave themselves. Mr. Leung Yu-jung, first on, thank you. Chairman, I just want to follow up that this is only a guideline when we talked about the etiquette for playing and singing the national anthem. But now moving on to clause 5, is it the same as clause 4 that there wouldn't be a criminal offense and that it is only a guideline for people to follow? Chairman, clause 5 states out very clearly what should be done during the occasions when national anthem is to be played and sung, and there is no penalty to it. Chairman, I see in Schedule 3, 1 bracket C. That 1E, that you need to take the Legislative Council oath under Section 19 of that ordinance. Yes, it should be 1E. I'm sorry. Yes, it should be 1E. So it's an encouragement, right? A guideline. Chairman, so this is a requirement for the event organizer to play the national anthem and to use the official standard score and the official recording of the national anthem. Well, what if they don't sing and play the national anthem? Well, let's say when we take the Legislative Council oath and the national anthem is not played and sung, what would happen? Chairman, well, this is actually a legal requirement now, so this shouldn't happen at all, because when you run for office, each candidate must take oath to be loyal to the country and to Hong Kong. So I don't see why there would be any problem in the national anthem not being played during the Legislative Council oath-taking ceremony. Or the oath-taking when I'm a candidate and when I'm a Legislative Council differs. So I want to ask whether you would take action or not. Let's say in 2020 I continue to run for office and I'm once again elected as Legislative Councillor. Can I request not to play and sing the national anthem? Permanent Secretary, the law requires that the national anthem be played and sung when taking the Legislative Council oath, and it must be in accordance with the standard score with an official recording. So can you not play it? No, this would be part of the ceremony. Well, so what if the anthem is not played? Well, I don't see this scenario happening. Well, what if it does happen? What if this does occur? Well, you cannot rule out the possibility. I just want you to answer this question. Let's say the Legislative Council did not play and sing the national anthem. Then what would happen? We have to look at the requirements, and we also have to look at the requirements under basic law. I just want you to give me a straight answer. Well, maybe due to some unforeseen circumstances, the national anthem was not played, then what would happen? Well, in accordance with this hypothesis, let's say it does happen, then under Basic Law 104, the oath-taking ceremony would not be complete without the playing of the national anthem. Mr. Charles Mock, I would like to look at 5(3). A reference to the national anthem being played and sung is a reference to the national anthem being played on musical instruments. Is there a requirement on specific musical instruments? I'm not sure whether the recording we hear every day is the standard score. From piano it might have become a violin, or does it matter whether it's being played on strings or on wind instruments? The State Council is now preparing the standard score and the instruments required. The official recording will be published by the State Council in the near future. We understand that it would include winds, strings, and also a piano version. Well, because some people may want to play it live. So when they're using their own musical instruments to play, is there a requirement on limitation on what instruments could be used? Maybe I want to be creative. I want to use the African drum. Would it be seen as disrespectful? The occasions under Schedule 3 are basically formal occasions. So, of course, if it needs to be an orchestra or a harmonic or philharmonic orchestra, then or a symphony, then need a requirement. What kind of requirements do you need? Because on different occasions, people might also play the national anthem. Would there be a risk? Would there be any guidelines for those who would like to play the national anthem? Because there might be some non-official occasions. Well, for occasions not under Schedule 3, then they are not restricted. That means they can be creative and express themselves and express the tempo and the anthem in different manners. Would it lead to seen as disrespectful behavior? Well, in accordance with the national law and to the legislation we have drawn up, we are only requiring the standard score and official recording to be used in formal occasions. There are no limitations in non-official occasions. But you have to be careful not to violate Clause 7. But then, in general, you should not commit the offense under Clause 7. Ms. Claudia Mo. I would like to ask if there would be a break in this 4-hour meeting. Well, you're holding another one on Saturday and another one on Monday. Is this really urgent? Well, we are just trying our best to complete it. Well, we all attach huge importance to it. Well, you also have lots of questions, right? Well, in around 2 hours, we'll take a small break. Well, I attach importance to it, but that doesn't mean that we do have to make such haste in rushing through this bill. Did we start at 2:30? Yes, around 4:30, we would take a 5-minute break. All right. Well, see, we don't have too many people here. Can you ring the quorum bell, please?
其實好14呢啲咧，其實有冇？
好，下一位有毛萬正議員。
Next, Ms. Claudine Mo speaking for the first time, 4 minutes. Thank you. For clause 5, brackets 2, the Chief Executive in Council may, by notice published in the Gazette, amend Schedule 3. In other words, you expect room for Schedule 3 to be amended. Mr. Lam Cheuk Ting asked very meticulous questions. The Hong Kong Jockey Club runs the Hanover Cup, and you said a race is not an official occasion, but you said nonetheless it could be amended. So does it mean the list of occasions on which the anthem would be played and sung would be shrunk instead of expanded? For clause 5, brackets 1 and 2, you said the anthem must be played at oath-taking ceremonies, and there are 5 items. And you said when the national flag is hoisted, the anthem would also be played, and there are 3 occasions. So in other words, there are 8 occasions on which the anthem must be played and sung. Permanent Secretary. In the main legislation, according to the main legislation, the C in Council can make amendments by publication on Gazette, and a negative vetting process would be adopted. So the list of occasions can be expanded or scaled down, but like I said, we currently do not know whether that list would be expanded or trimmed down. All the occasions on which the national anthem must be played and sung are already listed in Schedule 3. So there is a total of 8. Well, there are 9. The 9th occasion is the ceremonial opening of the legal year. Are we looking at the same document? Well, where is this from? Schedule 3 lists out 9 occasions in total. So occasion 1 has 8 to 5, and occasion 2, 1 to C. So an oath-taking ceremony has 5 items, and in the national flag raising ceremony has 3 items. The 3rd occasion is the National Day reception, etc. So are you referring to the subsequent pages? Well, you should. Well, then this is more than 9 occasions. Occasions 1 and 2 contain 8 occasions already, and so 9 plus 9 makes 18. There are 5 under occasion 1 and 3 under occasion 2. So you should not say that there are only 9 occasions. There are more than that. Well, we were talking about occasions 1 and 2. Well, he pointed out that there are 9 occasions. Mr. Ray Chan, 4 minutes. Thank you. I have more than 10 questions on clause 5. You should give us ample time to raise our questions. I think my observations and comments would help the government refine the wording of the bill. The government has been saying that there is no liability associated with clauses 4 and 5. In clause 5, the words must be are used in the English version. In other words, there's a statutory duty to sing and play the national anthem, I think the level of or the extent of the obligation is different from Clause 4. Clause 4 is simply a guidance provision, but in Clause 5 it is a condition. Despite the lack of liability, the condition must be complied with. So if the anthem could not be played due to a technical problem during the oath-taking, the oath-taking might become void. So I hope the government can clarify that. So if the national anthem is not played or sung, then the responsibility is on the organizer. Why is there no liability? So does it mean that the legislation would only impose control on other people but not the government themselves? Well, for the ceremonial opening of the legal year, I'm not very sure whether this should be considered an official occasion. Apparently, there is no liability. So is that the case? In the schedule, there are 9 occasions. So if the national anthem is not sung, there is no penalty. For example, for the flag raising ceremony on National Day, I wonder whether the anthem will be played again if there is a technical problem. So would the failure to fulfill such responsibility lead to non-criminal legal consequences? In the drafting of the national law anthem, or national anthem law, it stipulates that the national anthem must be played and sung during the list of occasions in Schedule 3, and after the bill is passed, these would be part of the law. So the oath-taking ceremony from 1(a) to E include the playing and singing of the national anthem. If the anthem is not played or sung, there is a chance that the oath-taking ceremony would not be considered completed. If the person involved cannot sing or play the anthem, well, it would not automatically constitute an offense. He didn't answer my first question. I asked why there are no penalties. So is the organizer legally obliged? So at LegCo, if the anthem is not played, then is there a liability? Our requirement is that when the national anthem is played or sung, it must be done in accordance with the standard score or standard or official recording. My question was, why isn't this made a liability? I answered this question already. The national anthem law has to do with the playing and singing of the national anthem. Well, I'm not just referring to the oath-taking ceremonies. Why couldn't there be penalties? So the government should be punished. You ask why the government is not punished. The government would also be regulated because this is a national law. In terms of playing and singing, there is no stipulation to punish the organizer. Mr. Wuchiwai, 4 minutes. The Permanent Secretary said after the bill is passed, the playing and singing of the national anthem would become part of the oath-taking ceremonies. Clause 5 are only guidance provisions and there is no liability. And for Clause 6, And again, there are no liabilities in this section. So if the oath taking is not completed, if during an oath taking ceremony when the anthem is played and sung, we would stand solemnly even though we might not sing along. So in theory, I have not breached the conditions. However, in an oath taking, if I do not open my mouth or sing along, then it might become a ground for disqualification. The national anthem law only requires the singing and playing of the national anthem on specific occasions. As for the completion of the relevant ceremonies, that should be decided by the person involved. According to Article 104 of the Basic Law, the powers of the witness might not be finite or definite. There are occasions on which the playing and singing of the anthem would be governed, and the Oath and Declarations Ordinance applies to different occasions. There's another set of liability and sanctions or punishments. So are you able to reconciliate both sets? For Article 103 and the Oath and Declarations Ordinance, there is some stipulation on effective nominations and ineffective nominations. So we should realize that the bill is very different from Basic Law Article 104.
Now say I stand there upright, but I do not sing along, and so I would fail to meet the etiquette requirement. But according to the permanent SAC, then there is a possibility that the presiding officer might take my failure to sing along as a failure to complete the oath. Is that correct? Now, if you look at the Oath and Declaration Ordinance and the court rulings, there are three requirements involved. First, the substance as well as the level of solemnness and whether it is convincing. Now, these three requirements actually do not come under the jurisdiction of the National Anthem Bill. Actually, it comes under the presiding officer's jurisdiction and judgment, as well as the Oath and Declaration Ordinance and Article 104 of Basic Law. Mr. Leung Yiu-chung, just now it was said that the final ruling over whether oath is completed actually is up to the court in the final analysis, and it is not up to the presiding officer. Is that correct? According to the Oath and Declaration Ordinance, the presiding officer has the authority to make a ruling whether an oath is completed. However, legal precedents have already indicated that members of the public can actually challenge the ruling of the presiding officer in a court. And there have been precedents in the law court that the presiding officer's ruling is being scrutinized by a judge and is being ruled on by a judge. Now, concerning the playing and singing of national anthem, of course, clauses 4 and 5 are on different subjects. I think they are both intertwined and cannot be separated because they are both about the singing and playing of national anthem. Now, if on a particular occasion national anthem is being played and say it's the swearing-in ceremony of a lawmaker, if a lawmaker fails to sing along to national anthem or fails to meet the national anthem etiquette, then would that be considered as a failure to complete the oath? Because clauses 4 and 5 are supposed to be read together. And so if there is such an event where the lawmaker in the swearing-in ceremony fails to meet the national anthem etiquette, would be construed as not having completed the oath. Now, whether or not an oath is being completed under Article 104 or under the Oath and Declaration Ordinance is really not up to the executive, because a different oath-taking ceremony is under the jurisdiction of different presiding officers, and they all have their own criteria and all their judgment. But I just want to point out that legal precedents have already indicated that presiding officers' rulings can be challenged in a court and can indeed be overturned in court. According to legal precedents or previous court rulings, the requirements as to whether an oath is being completed would include the substance of the oath being taken, and also level of solemnness, and also whether it is made in a convincing manner. But what about the behavior before oath is being taken, such as the singing and playing of national anthem? And how is that connected to the completion or otherwise of the oath? Now, according to the court ruling that has been handed down, there have been court cases that involved an interpretation over reading out the first word of the oath as well as the last word of the oath. And the court ruled that it is much more than that. It's not only about reading out the first and last word of the oath. Mr. Mok, 5-4, it is said that official recording and standard score will be placed in a website of the government. Now, I just want to ask about standard score. Schedule 1 and 2 carry a score. What's the difference? Why can't you simply refer to Schedule 1 and 2 score? Why do you have to bring in a website of the government where the standard score has been uploaded to? Madam Lam. Thank you. There are two types of standard scores. Now, Schedule 1 and 2 scores are annotated scores. It's a simplified scores. However, there is also a symphonic score, and it is now being prepared. And so, in future, different organizations and bodies can choose the appropriate score that suits their purpose. I just want to know when will that particular score being in the works will be done, because it may not tie in with the passage of the bill. We are in communication with the central authority, and it is indeed a hope that that particular version will be ready when this law is being passed. Now, I thought it was already under the national law. Why is it that the symphonic score still is in the works? I understand that the Central Music Academy is now working on the symphonic score. Now, it seems that it is very, very strange, because it seems that the central government still has no complete control over what kind of score can be played, and so much less the Hong Kong SAR government. And so shouldn't we wait until that symphonic score is being done before we pass the law? After the bill is passed into law, then we can look at the recording. Now, is it possible for you to use the subsidiary legislation format to give effect to the law, so that this particular part of the bill will only be given effect in a later date or on a later date? Now, if the official recording simply is taken out of the bill, then this bill cannot be passed into law. And that is why we must get the official recording and standard score ready before the bill can be passed into law. I think we'll have to bear it in mind, because you yourself said that without the official recording of the Senate score, then the bill will be pointless even if it's being passed into law, and that would become meaningless. Mr. Fan Kwok Wai? I just follow up on my earlier point. If there is an event hosted by the SAR government, especially major sporting events, on that occasion, what level of officials will be calling the shots over the playing and the singing of national anthem? I think Hong Kong is now trying to move in line with the mainland instead of international convention. For international convention, they only encourage you to respect national law, but there won't be any penalties. But for Hong Kong, now there will be penalties. Now, if because of various technical reasons, because of various technicalities, the national anthem is not being played, say because of engineering problem or because of other logistics problem, absence of musicians and so on and so forth, resulting in the failure of the playing and the singing of national anthem at an occasion where it is supposed to be played and sing, then what kind of legal consequences will there be? Because if there are to be such legal consequences, then the secretary simply cannot tell us that the officials from the government present on that particular occasion cannot shift their responsibility to the people that are in the service sector being present on that on the occasion on the front line. Once again, I have to point out that there are no penalties being involved here, and there is no provision saying that if there is a failure to meet certain requirements, then there will be penalties. Now, if Mr. Fan has paid any attention, you know that whenever we do a sporting event, there'll be a rundown, and so who is responsible for what is laid out very, very clearly. I think you have to specify very, very clearly, because even for the China-Hong Kong Liaison Office, they have actually hoisted the flag wrongly, upside down, because there could be engineering problems, because a machine can break down. I think civil servants are all very, very responsible. I think they can take care of this. I think we really have to take a double look at your expression being very responsible. Now, for the East Asian Games, now, is that included in major sporting events? Because it is hosted by Hong Kong ASF and OC. Now, if this is not counted as a major sporting event, even when the Hong Kong representative team is playing the games, then what exactly are major sporting events? Because we don't want to have events inadvertently being caught by Clause 6. Because we're talking about Bank of Charter Marathon, or the 7-a-side rugby event, or Rugby 7. Now, if they choose to play the national anthem, then could they be inadvertently caught by the NA bill? I think that's repetitive. No, that's not a repetition. I'm just rephrasing my question. You're talking about East Asian Games. We have said categorically these events have to be hosted by Hong Kong SAR government, and East Asian Games are not hosted by Hong Kong SAR government. Now, as for Clause 6, misuse of national anthem, and there are very clear scenarios being laid out which would involve the misuse of national anthem. Mr. Wu? Now, concerning the format of taking of oath, playing of national anthem is being included. 3 says that national anthem must be played with dignity. Now, suppose I'm on that occasion, I already stand uptight. I do not display any actions that can be construed as undignified. But I do not sing along. I only sing it in my heart. Then would that still result in me being caught by the law? Do I really have to sing it out loud to sing along before I am considered having met the etiquette requirement? Now, if someone has not sung out loud along with the national anthem, or maybe he is only lip singing, he is only mouthing the words, he has not made any sound, then is that allowed under the law? Would that affect the integrity of the oath?
秘書長。
主席，第5條呢，其實
Clause 5 is on occasions under Schedule through, and all of these occasions must feature the playing of and the singing of the national anthem in accordance with the specified manners. It, however, does not stipulate that people present must sing along to national anthem. Because there are people in Hong Kong who simply do not have any command of Putonghua at all. And so even at day one, the thinking was that it will be stipulated that people must be compelled by the law to sing along out loud to the national anthem. But of course, we would really want to encourage people that are present to sing along. So even if people do not sing along to national anthem, or if they cannot sing along to national anthem, then they will not be disqualified as not having completed the oath. Now, whether or not they will be disqualified in accordance with the oath requirement, then that will be up to the presiding officer. But you already said that even if someone doesn't sing along, it will not be construed as having broken the national anthem legislation. If you are talking about Schedule 3 occasions, now even if an official recording is being played so that he or she, if he or she chooses, can sing along, but if he or she indeed does not choose to sing along, and if he fails, if he does not violate Article 104 and Oath and Declaration Ordinance, then of course he has not violated the oath. Now exactly that's what I'm asking you. The Secretary said that it was up to the presiding officer. So I'm asking you, can the presiding officer say that if someone does not sing along to national anthem, then that can be construed as a ground for doubting the sincerity of the person taking the oath? Indeed, that understanding is correct. Mr. Fernando Zhang. Now, concerning occasions where national anthem needs to be played, there are 17 occasions where national anthem must be played, and they are all listed under Schedule 3. And one of them is major sporting events hosted by SAR government. This has happened in the past, and this will happen again in future. I'm talking about major international sporting events. These international sporting events, of course, might be of a major scale because we have done the East Asian Games before, and we don't know whether we are ever going to host Asian Games. We have attempted to host some of Olympic events and also Paralympic events. When people of other nationalities have won any prizes or awards at sporting events, then there is always national anthems being played. My question, therefore, is, after the passage of the NA Bill, on those occasions when anthems are being played, then the Chinese national anthem will be protected by the national anthem legislation. But what about the national anthems of other countries? When those national anthems are being played in Hong Kong, will they be protected under the national anthems legislation? I suppose no. Then isn't there a discrepancy here? Here, under this bill, it says very clearly that whether it's annotated score or complete score or full score, then people can sing along to those scores. But for other countries, they may have different versions of the national anthem. We may not have any legislation to protect their national anthems. So my question for the administration is this. Now, after the passage of the NA bill, don't you have a responsibility to protect not only the Chinese national anthems, but other countries' national anthems as well? Especially when those other countries' national anthems are being played on those 17 occasions.
在嘅國歌
The present NA bill has to be enacted into Hong Kong law because there is already a national law and national anthem. And national law of national anthem only governs the playing of the PRC's national anthems. And so my answer to Mr. Zhang's question is there won't be any protection under the national anthem legislation for other countries' national anthems. And major sporting events hosted by the Hong Kong government sometimes are co-organized by sub-organizations under ASF and OC. And these sub-organizations have also chosen on many occasions to play national anthems. But the government sees no reason to also list those events in Schedule 3. So you are talking about government sporting events, and when national anthem is being played there, then it will come under this bill. And for major sporting events, I think there is some discrepancy here between protection over Chinese national anthems as well as other countries' national anthems. Now, concerning occasions that are governed by the bill, including government major sporting events, the standards of governance is the same, but the other countries' anthems indeed will not be governed by the bill. Mr. Hui. Now, through the Schedule 3, there is a requirement for certain occasions to feature the playing of a national anthem. Now, I don't want to talk about whether this is appropriate and whether it's welcomed by society. I just want to say that under the one country, two system, our legislature, of course, uses Hong Kong's legal system rather than the NPC legal system, and we have separation of three powers between the judiciary, executive, and the legislature. And legislature of Hong Kong, of course, is independent and autonomous.
修改。
And so we could also make changes at the Chief Executive and Council to make sure that the national anthem can also be played and sung at different occasions. So I don't see why you need to put it in legislation. That are you worried that the people of Hong Kong will think that you're actually undermining the one country, two systems principle? Well, when we drop this legislation, we see that in the national law, there are different occasions listed, which includes oath-taking ceremony. Oath-taking ceremony will include all grades of governments and courts. If we try to apply this in Hong Kong, then it would also include legislative, council, administrative organizations. Well, can you stop here? Well, I have heard this before. We have discussed this in many of our previous meetings. So I want to know whether you have assessed the confidence that people have in the one country, two systems principle. Have you assessed it? I want to hear your views. Chairman, when legislators run for office, they would need to swear allegiance to the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. So when they take oath, they would also need to declare it. So we believe that this should not be in conflict with the one country, two systems principle. Well, I want to say that through administrative regions and then we could also have the national anthem sung anyways, but you believe that legislation should be formulated, am I right? Well, yes, LegCo can make their own arrangements, but then once this legislation is passed, it will become a legal requirement. Well, some members think that you have not consulted the consulted members on this. Or have you considered this? Should it be handled by the Legislative Council? Well, Mr. Hui, what does this have to do with Clause 5? Well, I understand. I think Mr. Dennis Kwok already asked this in the first meeting. Well, I don't think we are deviating, Chairman. If we were able to do this ourselves, then the public will have more confidence and will not affect one country, two systems. Or why do you have to stop me for asking this question? I'm just asking you what the connection is. Well, because it undermines the confidence of the general public. So I want to see whether you have consulted the legislative members on their views. Well, can you let him answer the question? Well, P.S. The Secretary has already answered this question many times. Our hearing and also our meetings are also part of the consultation process. Mr. Al-Nakim, well, we are now looking into Schedule 3. I want to see that the Hong Kong Bar Association suggests that you take out the whole of Part 2. I want you all to scrutinize it carefully and to understand why Part 2 should be taken out. I'm not sure Mr. Tang has already read through this. Look at Schedule 3. Well, you mentioned major sporting events held by the government. Well, many of the members have asked what you mean by major sporting event. Well, you say that it is a sporting event held in Hong Kong. Well, if that's the case, just say a Hong Kong sporting event. Why do you need to write major? Why do you need to put the word major? How do you define major? So your question is on the major sporting event. Yes. Well, we have already answered this before. We hold a biannual Hong Kong Games. So this is a major sporting event. I believe this sort of legislation is very appropriate. All right, so you only talk about Hong Kong Games. The district councils will be responsible for organizing this event. But then when district councils want to organize a sporting event, would that be considered a major sporting event? Well, my understanding is that it would not be included under 8 of a major sporting event. I think you need to make the definition clear. Well, today you tell me that Hong Kong Games is a major sporting event. I want to know what other events could be defined as major sporting events. Oh, today you tell me that the government will only hold the Hong Kong Games and that it is considered major. So that is your definition. But then when you bring this to the court later, the court will define the term major. And when this happens, you have to look into who the co-organizers are. How do you define major? Let's say HAB is working on M+ grants. Well, the HAB is co-organizing these M+ events. Well, do you consider them as major events? Well, you might need to earmark 100 million for the events. Would that be considered as major? Well, we have specified very clearly that the event must be held by the government. Yes, that is exactly my question. Are you saying that the HAB is not part of the government? How about M plus? Well, let's say there's a Premier League maybe I like many of the different soccer teams. But then, do you need to also play the national anthem before? Or how about for some of the provincial soccer matches, you also need to play the national anthem? Well, for sporting events held by the government, then you would need to play and sing the national anthem under Clause 5. Oh, so HAB is also under the government, am I right? Oh yes, HAB is part of the government. So that means that there are other major sporting events. I have to clarify that the HAB must first be the HAB must first prove that it is the organizer first before it can be seen as an event held by the government. Dr. Chen Chong Tai, I have a question on Schedule 3. How do you define official occasions? For example, the Legislative Council oath, because it might be in conflict with our previous understanding, or that there might be new scenarios. For example, we now have our the Hong Kong emblem in the council chambers, but I don't think that we have put up our flag before. Well, once the bill is passed, when you are playing and singing the national anthem, you would also need to hang up the national flag. So would you also have this simultaneous requirement that so if that's the case, then we would see the flag in our chambers, and that would be a new precedent. So of course we would also need to comply with the emblem law. So I want to ask whether the President or the Secretariat of LegCo have discussed this matter, and when there is a Legislative Council oath, the national flag and the region flag should also be hung up at the same time that the national anthem be played and sung. Well, we do not have this requirement now. So would the Secretariat do that also? Well, you have to ask the Secretariat. So you want to ask the LegCo Secretariat, right? Well, because if you want it to be official, then this should all happen simultaneously. So are you asking the PS or are you asking the Secretariat? You ask him whether he has discussed this with LegCo Secretariat on this matter. Permanent Secretary. Well, we do not have the requirement of hanging up the national flag and emblem, so there is no reason why I should discuss this with the Secretariat. All right. I want to go back to the etiquette for playing and singing the anthem, that you should be solemn. Or there have been discussions on what appropriate clothing is for LegCo. And I remember Mr. Leung Kwok-hong coming in wearing a T-shirt, and the president at that time stated that he was not being respectful because he wore only a T-shirt. So So now when you wear a t-shirt, you're not seen as being disrespectful. But when you look at clause 4 and 5, when you are taking oath, would that be actually in violation of the national anthem bill because you're not being respectful? Well, it won't, but then the answer will be very long. So perhaps I should answer this in your second round. Oh, Miss Claudia Mo is not here. Mr. Oh no, Kim, second round, 3 minutes, please. I'd like to follow up with the PS. You said that the HAB needs to be the organizer for it to be defined as to be held by the government, and that co-organizer would not mean organizer and sponsor would not mean an organizer. Yes, you are correct. Well, if that's the case, then why don't you put down the term organize and you use the word held? Mr. Peng will answer your question. Well, I think held by is very clear in that it does not include co-organize and sponsor. Well, I think the law draftsman should think clearly whether held by means organize, and also to consider the English and Chinese translation. Mr. Tang just now said that only the Hong Kong Games is organized by the government, but then I just went up to the HAB and there's another event, a sporting event. Why is it not included as a major sporting event? That is the Masters Games, which is organized by the HAB. Well, since it's organized by the HAB, why is it not defined as major sporting event held by the government? Well, PS, you don't know which events are organized by the government, so you really should think very clearly. Mr. Tang, well, every time we come up to LegCo to answer to members, we want to be accurate in our answers. Therefore, we have asked the HAB before we submitted the answer in. Well, since you have mentioned something that I'm not familiar with, I would go back to the HAB and find out the answer for you. Well, I'll like to give you a friendly reminder. Well, if you want to define major sporting event very clearly, I think you should first seek the advice of the HAB, and secondly, you should also have a clear definition of what is defined under major sporting event and what you define by held by. Well, we have asked the HAB about whether this equals to Hong Kong Games before. Mr. Julius Ho, well, I'd like to ask about clause 5 and clause 5 on the in schedule 3 for 5 and 6, that national anthem must be played and sung on those 2 occasions. So for 5, you must play the national anthem. So when this is essential, then usually the government is the organizer for these formal occasions. Schedule 3 lists out 15 scenarios in which the national anthem must be played and sung. So which means that nothing can happen before the national anthem is played. So when it is events not listed under 5 and not 6, then these two must be viewed as together, and if they are not limited under 5 and 6, then I think non-official occasions could also play the national anthem, as long as it is not disrespectful, insulting. So when you play the national anthem, it must be under the standards listed out in clause 7. And then we have to go back to clause 3 and 4 on what is the standard etiquette for playing and singing. Therefore, clause 4 is actually a guideline for clause 7 to help people understand what the offenses are, or what is considered as insulting behavior in clause 7. So we're talking about procedures here, that the national anthem must be played before those events are carried out. So I don't think we need to look into whether you are a sole organizer or a co-organizer. You can choose to play the national anthem. But I don't understand why they don't understand this clear concept. Am I explaining myself very clearly? Chairman, Dr. Ho's understanding is correct. All the occasions listed out in Schedule 3 are required to use the standard score or official recording of the national anthem being played for the singing of the national anthem. And then clause 4 lists out the etiquette for playing and singing. But I want to say that clause 4 and 7 have different requirements. Well, it's now 4:30. Let's take a 5-minute break before we commence the meeting.